Welcome again to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad you could be here, and thank you for joining us, following along with the NWHM Presents Sundays at Home presentations. Today's presentation is a midday concert and conversation with pianist Donna Weng Friedman and violinist Kelly Hall-Tompkins. My name is Lori Ann Turgison, and I serve as the Director of Education for the National Women's History Museum. We're located just outside of Washington, D.C. The museum was founded in 1996 and is the nation's only comprehensive women's history museum in the nation, and the most recognized institution dedicated to uncovering, interpreting, and celebrating women's diverse contributions to society. A renowned leader in women's history education, the museum brings to life the countless untold stories of women throughout history and serves as a space for all to inspire, experience, collaborate, and amplify women's impact, past, present, and future. For nearly 25 years, the NWHM has served as the largest online cultural institution dedicated to U.S. women's history, and we're excited that in the coming years, we'll finally have a physical home of our own in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, we'll continue sharing the powerful history of women in America through programming like what you see here today. We hope that after today's presentation, you'll find us on social media and join us in this critical work of representation. The National Women's History Museum is offering virtual programs such as this one on select Sundays each month. If you enjoy today's program, please continue to check our website for upcoming programs throughout the month of January and consider joining the museum as a charter member to be the first to learn about exciting museum happenings. As a reminder, we are recording this presentation so that it can be made available on our website following the event. And now I would love to introduce today's presenters. Award-winning pianist Donna Weng Friedman enjoys a varied career as a soloist, chamber musician, teacher, curator, and app developer. In collaboration with WQXR, Donna created and produced Heritage in Harmony, a virtual concert video series in celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month. She's the co-creator and co-host of Her Music, Her Story, a mini-series on WQXR, as well as a concert series that shines the light on women composers past and present. As their recitalist, she has appeared at Caramore, Jeu de Paume, France, Symphony Hall in Shanghai, the Flagler Museum, the 92nd Street Y, Carnegie Hall, Weill Recital Hall, and Alice Tully Hall, Lincoln Center. Donna has also conducted master classes at the Shanghai and Beijing conservatories and is on the faculty of the Man's School of Music. Winner of a Naumburg International Violin Competition Honorarium Prize and featured in the Smithsonian Museum for African American History, Kelly Hall-Tompkins is a violin soloist entrepreneur who has been acclaimed by the New York Times as, quote, the versatile violinist who makes the music come alive, end quote, for her total mastery as described by BBC Music Magazine, and she has been named New York Times New Yorker of the Year. She's appeared as a co-soloist in Carnegie Hall with Glenn Dicterow and conductor Leonard Slatkin in London at Queen Elizabeth Hall at Lincoln Center in New York, and with the symphonies of Baltimore, Dallas, Jacksonville, and Oakland, with recitals in Paris, New York, Toronto, Washington, Chicago, and at festivals all over the world. Donna starred as the violin soloist for The Fiddler in the Grammy and Tony nominated Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof. Inspired by her experience, she commissioned and developed the first ever Fiddler solo disc of all new arrangements, The Fiddler Expanding Tradition, which is featured in the new documentary Fiddler, A Miracle of Miracles, about the 55-year history of the musical. As founder of Music Kitchen Food for the Soul, Kelly Hall-Tompkins is a pioneer of social justice and classical music, bringing top artists in over 100 concerts coast to coast to homeless shelters from New York to Los Angeles, as well as internationally in Paris. Music Kitchen commissioned the Forgotten Voices song cycle by 15 award-winning composers and will present the world premiere in association with Carnegie Hall. Kelly is a newly appointed faculty member of the Manhattan School of Music, and we're so pleased that both Kelly and Donna can join us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yeah. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today on this wonderful series. And I'm very excited about my upcoming partnership with the National Women's History Museum and my series, Heritage in Harmony. Together, we are working on launching 2 educational programs dedicated to school-age girls of color with the goal of inspiring and empowering them to finding their true voice while giving them a platform so that their voices can be heard. A little later in the program, I will be sharing with you my performance of a very special piece called Prelude. That was an inspiration for one of these educational programs, and I hope you will enjoy that.
And I'm going to ask for your patience. Donna and Kelly were kind enough to record their presentations today. So in between our conversation, I'll be transitioning screens so that you can see videos of their performances with the wonderful sound quality that comes with those videos. But let's get started with our conversation. Donna, this month, the National Women's History Museum is celebrating women activists and role models. We're acutely aware that young women excel when they can see female role models who look like them, who are breaking barriers, and who are succeeding in their endeavors, much like yourself and Kelly. Tell us about your path to your current career as a musician. Who was a part of your early circle of supporters, and who are your role models?
Well, I started taking piano lessons when I was around 6.5 years old from a local piano teacher, but I did it because my older brother, he's several years older, was taking lessons, and I wanted to be like him. I wanted to do everything he did. I'm sure I was the annoying younger sister. So I started taking lessons, and it turned out that classical music was not his thing, but it was mine. So at the age of 7, I entered the Juilliard School pre-college division. And that was heaven for me. I loved being surrounded by music. When I was 10, 11, I started winning competitions. And with that came professional engagement, performing all throughout the tri-state area, even Florida. And I received some wonderful reviews in local papers by music critics. But one thing got to me. In every single review, the critics talked about how small I was. They talked about the fact that I couldn't reach the pedals, so I had to stand while performing. They talked about the fact that my hands were so tiny. How could she get around? How can someone so small play with such big sound? And phrases like small girl, great talent really bothered me. So my mother decided to take me to a very special concert in Lincoln Center, given by the legendary pianist, Alicia De La Rocha. Alicia De La Rocha was 4 feet 9 inches tall, and she had small hands, but there wasn't a piece of music in the piano repertoire that she couldn't play brilliantly. So I went to her concert, and I saw her on stage. She was wearing 4-inch high heels with platforms, and she played with passion and confidence. So I followed her along. I bought her recordings, and I listened to all her interviews. And at one interview, at the end of the interview, she said, "Don't let anybody tell you that small girls can't become great pianists." And I felt like she was talking to me. And it was instant. It never bothered me again. I kept getting comments about my size, but it didn't bother me after that. So she was my first real inspiration. And then several years later, my mom took me to another concert at Lincoln Center. This time it was pianist Mitsuko Uchida, who just came to the country. And she was the first female pianist of Asian descent that I'd ever heard of. And when I sat there with my mom in the 3rd row, I'll never forget, feeling so proud that I could see myself in her face. I can relate to the fact that we were both Asian, we were both females, and she was up there playing magnificently. The audience adored her. And I said to myself, maybe I could do it. So she was my second incredible role model that changed my life. And, during this entire journey, my mother was so supportive. She came from a family in China, very wealthy, well-educated family. So she was always surrounded by art and music, and she understood what that meant to me. But my father came from a completely different background. And he was the oldest of 13 children in a very, very poor family in Ningpo. Only 5 children survived childhood.
Mm.
And the first time he heard music was at school when one of the teachers played on a rinky-dinky upright piano, but he thought it was the most glorious sound that he'd ever heard. So he ran back to his home and he found a wooden plank, a board, and he carved a keyboard on that wooden board. And he would close his eyes every day and pretend to be playing the piano and hearing things, music in his head. In the 1940s, he fled China during the Japanese occupation, and he came to this country with the hope of having a better life. When he first got here, he had nothing, no money, no friends, no family. It was pretty dismal, but he got himself a job that he hated. He found a place to stay at night that was depressing. He ate rice and peanut butter every day to save money. But he was very impressed with the different brands of peanut butter that this country had. In China, he made his own peanut butter. So after a while, he saved his pennies so that he could buy himself one special gift, a radio. And that radio saved his life because he came home every night and he listened to music, incredible music, all kinds of music, and that gave him hope. So years later, when I was 11, 12 years old, and we were living in Forest Hills, Queens, I'll never forget one summer evening, 6 p.m., my mother was in the kitchen making dinner. I was practicing piano. I just learned my first piece by Frédéric Chopin, the Waltz in C sharp minor. And I was playing it, and my father came home from work, and he stood there for a minute listening to me intently. Then he ran into the kitchen and he grabbed my mom and they started dancing and dancing while I was playing that Chopin waltz. And I felt such joy. And when I finished playing, my father said to me that that was one of the first pieces he ever heard on his radio when he first came to this country. And that gave him hope. But coming home today, hearing me play that piece made him realize that his hopes and dreams have come true. So from that point on, I performed that Chopin waltz in C sharp minor as my first encore after every solo recital in honor of my parents. And I'd like to share with you my performance of that piece in honor and in memory of my parents. Chopin waltz in C sharp minor.
That was beautiful. I hope second time I managed to get the audio to sound better for you, because that was such a wonderful piece. Thank you for sharing that, Donna. And Kelly, now will you also please share about your career path? Who were your mentors? Who inspired you?
Well, I have to say just that first and foremost, my biggest mentor as a child and always is my mom. She's one of the smartest people I know, and just the way that she lives her life with excellence in everything that she does, I think that influenced me from a very young age. I'm the first person in my family to be a professional classical musician, and I think that I find it really, really special in my case that I chose it for myself. I think there are earlier times that I could have realized what was happening and maybe, asked for lessons or something like that. When I was 4 years old, there was a piano in the house that we lived in just by circumstance. And I would go and pick out things that I heard from media, commercials or movies or whatever, and play these little concerts for my mom when I was about 4. But it was not until 9 that I chose to play the violin. And I think it's due to a lot of disparate factors, actually. I grew up Lutheran. I think that was one of the biggest influences. So I heard the music of Bach every Sunday, and just generally Baroque music. And so I think from then and now, God speaks Baroque, as far as I'm concerned. Well, Brahms too, but mainly Baroque. And also I watched Warner Brothers cartoons, and I was absolutely enthralled with the original composition there, the marriage of music and movement, and also the first actual classical pieces that I heard in that context. And then the final influence, I think, the final catalyst was that, or one of the two-part catalyst was that my elementary school took us to see the Greenville Symphony, my hometown orchestra. And I remember hanging over the balcony, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that the piece that I was so enthralled by was Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade. And of course, it's rife with all these violin solos. And I was pretty taken with the whole thing, the entire orchestral feel. It brought to life for me, I think, what I had heard only in cartoons. And the thing that followed that visit was a string quartet, which came to my elementary school. And at that point, I was completely taken. I said, that's what I want to do. And so I started taking violin lessons in the public school system. I'm a very big proponent of public school, excellent public school education. I think I was very lucky to have a string program in the school that I went to, as they're starting to shrink in number around the country. But I think, I started in what a lot of people consider to be relatively late, but if I think about my trajectory, it really blows my mind. I started winning competitions. A few years later, I was winning, all-state orchestra concertmaster and concerto competitions. I became part of the pre-college program at Converse College, which was originally started its life as an all-women's college. I don't think it was necessarily 100% by the time I was there as a student. And then I became concertmaster of my youth orchestra, the Carolina Youth Symphony. And then this extraordinary thing happened for me. And that was, there are these times in your life and your development where all of the ingredients come together to be a greater than the sum of the parts impact on your life. And for me, that was going to Tanglewood. My high school teacher said to me, "You're one of the best violin students in the country, and you need to be, in an environment with other students like you." And I didn't know anything about this kind of thing. I looked at the price tag for such a summer experience, and I was embarrassed to take this to my mom, for consideration. But I'm like, here, the teacher said I should do this. My mom is the reason that I have the ability to enjoy the career that I have today. She has and continues to support me as a child, financially and spiritually, and in terms of encouragement in every way. So I went there that summer, and then I went back the following summer. And I think I had the impression um, at that point, going to a summer experience with kids who were from Boston and the major cities, and they had access to the major orchestras, I started to feel a bit like I was maybe missing something by being from a small city in a small city in the South. But then another, I had so many things that I needed for my development. And one of those critical things was also another public school. I had the great and amazing fortune of going to the Greenville County Fine Arts Center, which was at the time still is a magnet school, a magnet fine arts school. And so I went to my regular academic course high school for that first half of the day, and I went to this art school every day in the afternoon. And like Donna said, that was heaven. I loved being able to immerse myself and to have music theory and music history every day. And I was able to get the top score on those AP classes, and then went to the Eastman School of Music, where they said, that's really nice, but you're still going to take our program, which I think which is just fine, because I absolutely loved the Eastman School of Music. And so I think, my mentors, I never since my mom is the overarching mentor in my life, and she had this wonderful career where she started her professional life as a psychologist. She defended her master's thesis the day before she had me, and then she transitioned to being an engineer at IBM. I was and am immensely proud of my mom. I'm very inspired by her. And I think I took from that I can do anything. So I didn't need any of the other I didn't need the other role models or mentors to look like me. When I grew up, my role models were Pinchas Zuckerman and Itzhak Perlman and Yo-Yo Ma. And then a little later, once I got into college, David Oistrakh. David Oistrakh is still my idol. Those were my mentors. I'm very comfortable with that. I think and also now that I know of Florence Price, I admire the perseverance and the wonderful artistry that she brought in, was celebrated in her time and then quickly forgotten, and then sort of experiencing a resurgence. So anyway, I love that I chose classical music for myself. I think that there was a great power in that for my development. And even though I felt like I was in a removed place, and I felt for a long time that I started too late, the trajectory is incredible to me, from when I think of starting at 9 years old. And it was really not that long later, at 22, that I was runner-up at the New York Philharmonic. I think, to me, that's just a kind of an extraordinary trajectory. But so during this particular time, this is a really unique and challenging time for those of us whose life's work, life's passion is to make music and to do that in front of people and to play concerts. But I was terrified when this happened. I saw it coming, and I prepared in every way. I got lots of toilet paper. I didn't have to buy toilet paper until June. But aside from that, I was very, we were terrified with what would happen with the field. But I'm really excited that this has been one of the biggest, the busiest creative periods of my entire life. And there are a lot of projects that have come out of this time that would not have existed but for these god awful circumstances. And one of those, I've premiered 4 pieces. To give you an example, I've authored a chapter for a book, and am in the process of getting my own book published, and many, many, many other things. But one of the things that I want to share with you, the next piece, is something that came out of this time. And so one of the pieces that I premiered was commissioned by the American Composers Orchestra. They reached out to me to be a featured soloist in their Connecting Community program, and asked me to peruse a list of 75 composers and choose one. I did listen to every single one of them, but I was delighted to see a composer that I had just met the year before, Guy Mintus. We are both featured in the Fiddler film, the documentary on the 55-year history of Fiddler on the Roof, A Miracle of Miracles, which, if you want to actually see the full film in its entirety, as it's intended by the directors. You can see that on Amazon Prime. Anyway, so Guy and I discovered a real affinity for working with one another, a real affinity for flamenco music. And so we worked together on this project, and this piece, Inner Compás, is the result. Compás in flamenco literally means time, but it's also the structure of the rhythmic structure of flamenco, of which there are several. And he borrows from many of them. So it's a contemporary piece, but it's very much foundationally, it's very much derived from the soul and the fire of flamenco. So I hope you enjoy.
But Kelly, January marks the celebration of National Mentoring Month. You've talked a little bit about your mentors thus far. Mentorship is considered a critical component of career success to help build social capital, as well as to exchange knowledge and experience and provide a greater perspective in an industry, an organization, or a specific skill. Who or what inspires you to continue on those days when you don't feel like playing? Do you still have role models? You talked about some of your early role models, but do you still have role models? And what advice would you give to young dreamers who are watching today?
You know, I have to say there are very few days, if any at all. I want to play every day. It's to me like the air I breathe. And if I'm an entrepreneur, which means that there's a lot of, um, there's sometimes, cultivation business work to be done. And if I'm away from the violin too long in a day, I get antsy. So there's really, it's just something that I love so much that I really crave doing it. I enjoy practicing. I love the idea of the workshop to get from here to there, it's important to be able to focus and have solitary time. I do still have role models. I find them in all directions. People who have lived before, people who are living now, people who are older than me or younger than me. I love first of all, I've neglected to mention as my mentors two of my violin teachers, Charlie Castleman and Glenn Dicterow. Those are, they're some of the preeminent violinists of our time, and I continue to be inspired by them. Glenn Dicterow, the former concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic, and Charlie Castleman, just the eminent violin soloist, a prize winner from Tchaikovsky competition, and I think he played on the Ed Sullivan Show when he was about 7 years old or something like that. So they continue to be models of inspiration for me. I'm inspired by Stacey Abrams. I'm inspired by a young cellist that I worked with at the BBC Proms when I had the great honor of leading Chineke, the orchestra, in their debut Proms concert. The soloist was Sheku Kanemason. I think he's a wonderful artist. I continue to look, at those who came before, David Oistrakh and some of the violinists that are doing wonderful things. And yet I have my voice, and I feel like it's my life's work, and it's also my responsibility to develop what I feel like I have to give the world as much as I possibly can, to the highest degree that I can. So I think that's what I would tell young people today, that you have to find something that you're passionate about, something you can't live without, and develop that to the absolute best of your ability, and do not give up. We all have heard lots of no's. You have to persevere through lots of no's, and hold on to your idea when you're the only one doing it. That's, to me, and there are a lot of disappointments. It's inevitable for anybody. Sometimes when you have featured artists here like me and Donna, there are people who assume that that some things are just easier for some people, and maybe to a certain extent that's true, but everyone has disappointments, and you may not see that part, but those are the things that you must get through to get to the places that we are living now and aspire to in the future. It doesn't feel good, but disappointments happen. I heard a phrase once, and in fact, I think it was, I can't remember which woman has this quote, but over, under, and through. That's my approach. Over, under, and through. The obstacle, the adversity, the opposition, whatever it is. Over, under, through, however. But we have to persevere in the things that are meaningful to us, and that allow us to live the full manifestation, full flower of our potential. And I believe very strongly in that. That seed was planted in me by my mom, for sure. So yeah, I guess, should we hear the next piece? I think I would like to share a little bit about the piece that we're going to hear. Another one of my premieres from this summer, and another piece that, but for this time, might not exist, but it's not for a good reason. We all watched in horror the senseless killing of George Floyd this summer. It was heartening to see a worldwide response, finally, to something that's been happening for centuries. Because of what happened to that gentle soul, we've also come to learn of others that have suffered the same fate. And it was because of what happened to George Floyd that we ever had a chance of knowing the name Elijah Maclean. He was killed similarly by police a year before, actually, but it came to light this summer. And I was absolutely, my breath, it took my breath away. Sometimes I practiced my scales in front of the news. So I had my violin in my hands when I saw the mirror image in front of me, this slight young man with a violin in his hands. And that's the person who lost his life so tragically. And I've gotten to be friends with the wonderful Pulitzer Prize winning composer Ellen Tafe Zwillick, and we have been talking about the events of this unbelievable time, all of it. And she was so struck and so moved by that, and she wanted to write a piece, a statement in memory of, in honor of this life taken too soon. So this is a piece. I had a hard time even playing it. There's a persistent lump in my throat even as I describe it, and when I played it, the same. This is a little violin music in memory of Elijah Maclean by Ellen Tafe Zwillick. you.
That was very powerful, and you can see how impacted you were emotionally by that piece. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Okay, Donna, can I ask you the same question? What continues to inspire you, and what would you advise your younger self today?
Well, every morning I used to have a morning ritual because I'm up before everybody else. I walk the dog, and I would always have my coffee watching the news, but the news got to be too much for me, too depressing. I didn't like to start my day that way. So I changed it. And every morning I listen to music. And I search for music that I don't know. Music by contemporary composers who are, creating music from all over the world. And music composed by female composers, past and present, that have been overlooked simply for the reasons that they are women. And every morning I would discover something new. And on a couple of occasions, I would fall in love with a piece. And it was for piano, I would, find the music and I would learn it. And on one such occasion, I came across a gem of a piece, simply entitled Prelude. And it's about 4.5 minutes long. And something about this piece touched me so deeply. I felt an instant connection to it. So I wanted to learn more about the piece and the composer. And it turns out the composer, Bayata Moon, is a friend and colleague of mine. And I know Kelly knows Bayata as well. But I hadn't seen Bayata since we were at Juilliard. We studied with the same teacher, Adele Marcus. And as far as I knew, she was still a performance major, back then. And I wanted to know what, her journey was and how she switched to composition. So I reached out to her and we had a wonderful conversation. And she told me that the Prelude was her first composition for solo piano, and that having been brought up in a traditional Korean American family in Indiana, where there were almost no other Asian families there to connect with, she felt out of place and invisible. And in her own words, she said, "Years later, when I wrote this prelude, it gave voice to the child in me who was afraid to express herself before. My hope is that all children's voices can be heard and acknowledged." And really, that's how I felt. I felt that in the piece, and that's how I feel. And that's the message I want to give to children. And that's the inspiration for these wonderful educational programs that, I'm partnering with the National Women's History Museum. So I would like to share with you my performance of Bayata Moon's Prelude.
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
I love it when music gives me goosebumps. Thank you for sharing that. That was so beautiful. And we're coming up on the close of our program. We do have one final performance to share with you, but before we do that, on behalf of the National Women's History Museum, we want to thank Donna and Kelly for sharing their talents and insights with us today. We so appreciate your time. Thank you to our audience members and supporters. We hope you'll join us for new programming each Sunday this month and ongoing throughout the new year. Donna and Kelly, will you please tell us about this final piece that you did together, and we'll close our program today on a musical note.
Yes, I am really thrilled that we have something to share with you with our performance together. About a year, I guess, in the before times, Donna reached out to me about playing this little gem of a work on a performance we did together at the Yamaha Hall, I believe it was, or no, the Steinway Hall. And I just fell in love with this little piece by a new composer that I had never heard of. Of course, I knew of the great pedagogue, Nadia Bolanger, but I didn't know it was actually her little sister that went on to win the prestigious Prix de Rome as the first woman to do so. And that she had a tragically short life at age 20, dying at age 22, but she left behind some 40 works. And this little gem of a piece is one of them, the Nocturne. I was so thrilled not only to play it with Donna for the first time before the pandemic, but also I reached out to Donna. I said, hey, let's just do this remote collaboration. So we did that.
Yeah, and I was delighted to do this virtual performance with Kelly. And how we do it is that, I record myself on my piano, I send it to Kelly, she records herself listening to me in her ears, and somehow magically it worked. And it's a very special recording to me. And just a side note, Lilly Bolanger, I read someplace that she wrote this piece in just 2 days. And what is so extraordinary about her, as Kelly said, she lived a very short life due to a chronic illness, is that through it all, she was sick and exhausted, but she never stopped making music. She was committed and passionate about composing. And when she was dying, she completed her final piece, Pie Jesu, by dictating every note to her sister, Nadia Bolanger. So she is someone who I adore. I adore her music, and she's an inspiration. I hope that you will enjoy our performance of Lilly Bolanger's Nocturne. Thank you.
Thank you both. I just wanted to say thank you. That was so beautiful and so moving, and such a wonderful way to spend a Sunday. Thank you again for sharing your talents with us. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And please do tune in for more Sundays at Home programming. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.